Way After Dark.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Way After Dark podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Sean Canino, here with an awesome group of people. Uh, Screenwriter, producer extraordinaire, Leah Poliat, screenwriter, author, producer, executive, Jeremy Ellis, media historian, Katie Palumbo. And guess what, everybody? Today, we are talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street, one of the most iconic horror movies ever. Really excited to talk about this one. Should we start? I think we start some of our other shows. If you guys want to talk about your first experience with this movie, first time watching it, maybe Leah, since you're new to the show, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so I rewatched it for the first time in at least 10 to 12 years. So it has been a minute. And the one connection that I have to is like one of my favorite movies as a as a child was Jeepers Creepers, which I
I love
think
that movie.
actually grabs so much from Nightmare on Elm Street. Aesthetically, like you can just sort of see the creeper is very similar to Freddy Krueger. And rewatching it last night, I was just like, damn, the practical in the movie really holds up. It is a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
So Jeepers drove you to watch it, and then what was your initial reaction? Like, what was, other than the effects, like, how was, visceral, on a visceral level, like, what did you feel? What did you think?
I think it just plays really well with showing you that you need to have I think practical effects is something that speaks to me really close to the heart. It is some of the best of what horror can play with. And Freddy Krueger, also on a story level, is so dark. It is an incredibly dark character. So they just made sure every bit of his backstory is the worst possible thing to have a punch that's equal to why is a character doing something? Why is this motivation to kill all of these kids so strong? And yeah, that's those are my two initial reactions from the rewatch.
Love it. Katie, what do you think?
Well, first, I just wanted to piggyback off something Leah said. I completely agree about Freddy in the first movie being
Mhm.
so dark and like everything you would be scared of. And it's actually something I don't love about the sequels. I know there are some people who love funny Freddy.
Right.
I think that the way he's crafted in the first movie is so dark and so scary that I'm a little disappointed by the comedy version.
Totally.
That being said, I didn't see this movie until I was an adult because I was afraid of it. I heard what the premise was when I was like 8 or 9, and I thought the idea of someone coming after you and being asleep so you can't do anything about it was the scariest thing I'd ever heard. And I was like, I'm never watching that movie. That's horrible. And then I was probably in my 20s and was just like, okay, this is a classic. I need to, kind of move with it. And I watched it and I was like, it's a scary premise and it's a dark movie, but like that was manageable. I don't feel traumatized. I came out of it being like, that was good and I'm glad I watched it.
Interesting.
Yeah, Jeremy, tell it, because on our last episode, or one of our last episodes, this was your number one favorite scary movie.
So I watched it this afternoon, actually, after attempting to watch it last night. Unfortunately, kids and exhaustion got the better of me. But this movie like lives throughout my entire memory. I remember watching it when I was young. I remember going down to like a babysitter's room, like seeing it on. I had a sleepover. I remember at like the Jewish, JCC with a bunch of kids where they watched the second one. Like, great like 80s, 90s parenting where they're like, oh, the kids are having a sleepover, a bunch of Jewish kids. Like, what should we show them? I don't know, Nightmare on Elm Street, just throw that on. So I love this movie. I could talk about it forever. I think Freddy Krueger was, and really honestly, in the first one remains really scary.
So for me, growing up, I don't know how, I don't remember a moment, but I just know that like Freddy Krueger was the scariest character in like movies. And and this was, I was coming probably conscious of these types of characters probably what in the early 90s. So, it's 7, 8, 9. I don't know how old I was. So, but like, I wasn't at that point, I wasn't watching any scary movies. I was scared to watch scary movies. I remember, going when I was 5 years old to Disney World with my mom and like closing my eyes during the entire Haunted Mansion ride. So like I was not about that at that point in my life. I just know this is the scariest thing ever. I should avoid it like the plague. But at the same time during Halloween, you had all the Freddy Krueger masks. So like it wasn't Michael Myers, it wasn't Jason, it wasn't any, it was Freddy Krueger. And so
By
uh
far, by
it
like a
was it
country
was
mile.
it was like that was like, oh my God, you don't want to mess with that, right? And so, the first sort of scary movie, I think scary movie that I really saw in theaters was Sixth Sense, which was, 99. And then I got to like watching like other like paranormal creepy movies, and I began to really like that. But like because I guess it was old at this point, like Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street didn't really cross my mind. It wasn't really in the zeitgeist in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's like, okay. And then um I became like interested in working in movies and television, and graduated from college. I got a job as a camera PA on the set of a MOW, made for TV movie in Montreal, and the movie was called Killer Bees. Later branded as Black Swarm. And it was exactly what you think it is. It was like, a Sharknado-y precursor. But there was this like older dude who was like the father figure or the grandfather figure in the movie. And like really nice guy, like really polite, but like he got a lot of attention. It's like, who is this guy who's like getting a lot of attention from everybody? I had never heard of any of these people. And then, looked it up, and it was Robert Englund. And so he was sort of the name in this movie that I worked on. And so shortly after that, I you know I watched Elm Street for the first, like, oh, I gotta watch it. Like I work with this guy. And by that point I been scared by a million movies. I was like, is this that scary? Like, now is it really as scary as I thought it was? It was, to me as a 22-year-old, it was a really terrifying movie. And it was, it's relentless. It doesn't let up. And if everything like what Leah you're talking about with the practical effects, with like the maggots and the worms and in the flesh, and like, but like all of it is just like and the jump scares, the dream, the part where we don't know if we're dreaming or not. I love movies like that. I think movies that I thought that were my, in my sort of top scary movies, like Mulholland Drive and Jacob's Ladder, have that as well. But this is one that fully you don't know where you are. You don't know if you're safe at any time from this dude. He could jump out of anywhere. We don't know what he can do and what he can't do. He could walk through prison bars. He can do all these things. And so, it's terrifying in that sense. And then I just rewatched it, to get ready for this. And I'm like, it's still scary, it still holds up, but it's also such a cool time capsule of the 80s, because you have this kind of synth pop, type of vibe to it. I was reading that the song Dreamweaver, which has that sort of synth pop quality to it,
Right.
inspired the music, not only the concept, but like the music of this.
Right.
So all of it just
But-
is in its own entity such an interest. There's one thing that we can delay that I'll talk about that I didn't like about it, but it holds a lot of meaning for me, kind of accidentally, but also kind of like this was the gold standard of the scariest thing ever as an impressionable child, and I didn't think about touching it because it was just so scary. And
Right. It was that
probably
hot
good.
potato of a movie. Hot potato of a movie that you're like afraid to go near.
Probably good that I didn't, to be honest, at that age. But now obviously I'm glad that I did.
Well,
It's interesting to
perfect.
hear when everybody sees these things at different times, either because of different ages or they came to it. Because, one thing about any kind of a movie or a book, but especially when it comes to things that can scare you, is like when you see it is really, really important. So I looked it up. It turns out that the movie was released November 9th, which is basically this week, 1984. So if I do my math right, I believe that's
41 years ago.
41 years ago, right? 41
Yeah, it
years
was
ago.
3 weeks before I was born, essentially.
Wow. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
there you go. I think I'm the oldest on this podcast. It is interesting to hear everybody talk about their first time with Freddy.
Well,
Yeah, for
Sean,
sure.
what you were saying about an 80s time capsule, this movie has the distinct honor of having a credit that says introducing Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yeah.
But we have to
Needed
talk cast.
introducing at the time.
We definitely have
Yeah.
to talk cast. All right. Well, let me just do a quick couple
Yeah, do it.
stats. So like I said, the movie came out 41 years ago, basically this week. It was made for a $1.8 million budget. Its opening weekend was $1.27 million. And its domestic gross was 25,624,448. It was made by a small little studio called New Line, which was new to the scene. Really not getting enough credit as kind of like the first independent at the time, kind of before Miramax. So that's kind of its own great story. Robert Shea, whose wife, of course, is or ex-wife, is it right? Lynn Shea is his
Sister.
wife. What was that?
Sister.
Sister, not wife. That's right. Sister. Excuse me. Thank you. Sister, who appears in this movie and would go on to have quite a seminal career in horror movies herself. But young production executive Michael DeLuca, who's now running, Warner Brothers, right, is at the heart of this thing. Sort of, I think, the first one to kind of figure out that it might be something. And worldwide, the movie makes $57.1 million. This was my generation. To me, it doesn't get enough comparisons, but like this is The Exorcist, this is Jaws, this is Psycho. People would talk about The Exorcist with the head spinning and the pea soup and the cross and the whole thing. And I just feel like Nightmare on Elm Street was that movie. Leah hit on one of the things that really, I think, holds up and reoccurred to me now, but which is that like why he is who he is and the whole mythology for who he is and what he's doing, and the fact that this is really just a revenge on the parents is so dark. Wes Craven does such an unbelievably good job in terms of like the iconic imagery of really making you feel like it is a dream. Like to look at that face that first time, everything about how he's introduced. There's a lot I want to say about that, but I'll save it for later. But I think he's just such a standout among all of the movie monsters. Robert Englund played the character. Robert Englund, who, by the way, just got a star on the Walk of Fame on Halloween, very fittingly, for basically playing Freddy Krueger for his career.
Yeah.
Like 4 decades of horror fans. It's been rediscovered, but he played it so deliciously sinister. Like, and it was the thing where he was just on the cusp of like having like psychopathic fun with it, that it then became, like so many things that are famous when they first come out, they become, parodied. Like it's the Silence of the Lambs. Like I ate his liver beans with some nice Chianti and some fava beans. And like the first time you heard that, you lost your mind, but then it becomes a punchline. And so Freddy became a punchline, but in this movie, like really dark, like really scary. No mask essentially, but it was great. Written and directed by Wes Craven in his,
this was like I think
his
like
third?
his fifth or sixth. No, this was I was reading out
He was
because
kicking around. He was right.
He was
The
Last House
on the
Left,
left is 70s earlier.
and then Hills Have Eyes.
Right,
But then
right.
he had some like, I don't know if they were flops necessarily, but like he did some things that didn't really work, and then this obviously did really work. Reading on it, it was interesting to me because we talked about Halloween on another episode, and with Halloween, it's like that was sort of the first like slasherish villain, in movie, and that a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences. I was a little surprised that from reading about like that this movie got as many sort of passes as it did. Now, part of that was, I think, I was reading that Disney was potentially interested, which that was like pre Eisner, I believe. So that was like the version of Disney that was maybe going to be bought out and sold for parts, but they wanted to make it like a PG-13, which that would have been, a mistake, obviously, but that just think of how things would have been then. But so, yeah, it had trouble finding a home. And then obviously New Line, which, was an independent. And I think New Line, I believe they did the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies that were like
that was their
Yeah,
with a big head.
that was my when I was like first noticing when I was like 5 years old, noticing like, oh, who is this? What's this credit for at the beginning of the movie that I love? But yeah, so I was surprised that it had such a problem in terms of finding financing and finding a home. I think, but it finally did.
Well, I think one of the reasons for that might be, and I think it's part of its appeal, is on a mythology level in terms of what the character is compared with like the Michael Myers, Nightmare on Elm Street was already early '80s and had been out. You had probably by that point, a slew of kind of like the exploitation of the '80s movies starting to sort of filter through. So but like. And I don't think, when obviously New Line made this thing, anybody knew that it was going to become what it was going to become. There was another movie that I wonder if this was Disney now called Dreamscape with Dennis Quaid, which is actually a pretty good little movie, but also involving like going into dreams. I think this was like a big thing at the time, like dream therapy and all that other stuff. But the idea of this character as a boogeyman just seems so different, right? Like he's first of all, the idea that he can get you in your dreams, right? Like I was saying, like you can sort of not shower, you can take a lot of baths, you can like not go in the ocean if you're scared of right? Like, but you can't not fall asleep. So just as like a hook, as an idea, like that's pretty terrifying. Um the the idea that he also is burned beyond recognition, right? Like I think the thing that Wes Craven did so well with this character, which it takes a lot of the visualization of it coming to life to really, I think, imagine what it's going to be. But he just did such a good job, and I feel like this is where the movie really does kind of stand unique, or at least is the foundation for, like you said, Jeepers Creepers and Jacob's Ladder and all these other sort of like ethereal kind of dreamlike movies. But it really does. It feels like it does that excellent job that only a movie can do of making you feel like you are actually experiencing the thing that the movie's about, which is that this is a bad dream. And there's just so much about it, from the way that it's filmed, from the set dressing to the music to the blown out lighting in some cases to just everything about it is, I think, so different. Even I was surprised by it because I watched it this afternoon, like his appearance, right? Like it's such a great build up. And again, it feels like a dream, like, but boom, he's just there, right? There's no lurking in the shadows. There's no like, oh, we know who this guy is, right? Like he's 16 years, none of that Loomis setup or anything. There's no ghost story told around the campfire about Jason Voorhees. It's just like I had this bad dream. The only sort of even ominous note is that like they kind of all had this bad dream. Like that's the only thing, like that little throwaway line that Johnny Depp says in the very beginning. And then all of a sudden, Tina goes outside and obviously something's up, right? And there's this guy there. But I just thought it it had to be a hard sell in the beginning just for that reason alone. Not to mention
Well,
like the original mythology he was like a child pedophile, which child pedophilia is always it's always a big no off the bat.
something kind of going off what you were saying. In a way, it's almost the anti-Halloween. Halloween, he has no face, no backstory.
Right.
Freddy Krueger has a very distinctive face and all the backstory. Halloween has a lot of setup, very little blood, takes a while to get to the kill. Nightmare on Elm Street has no setup, kill almost immediately, and a blood geyser. So
Right.
it's interesting because they're both so iconic, but they're just each embracing such different areas of what a slasher can be.
Right. Well, and also like Wes Craven talked about, the glove was meant to be something distinct, right? He thought about a sickle. He didn't want to just do a knife. So it was a conscientious decision, and razor fingernails is pretty scary.
Talk about the boiler room, which I think was initially supposed to be there's supposed to be more to it than there was. But what's brilliant about the boiler room is not only does it make sense story wise, but also when you're dealing with how many and as storytellers, we visual storytellers, we try and deal with this as well. Like how many nooks and crannies can your antagonists hide in and jump out and attack you, right? And the boiler room has so many of those. You don't It's very disorienting. You don't really, you don't know, like, okay, if you keep going down this, sort of this stretch, like if he's hiding behind that pipe, if he's hiding behind this tank. we don't know any of that. So you really feel unsafe in there. And I think that's, we talked about Halloween where there are like 2 jump scares maybe, and obviously there are way more in this one. Um, and I think it's a lot of it's set design. A lot of it's set design, and a lot of it's a very intentional, okay, where could this guy be hiding?
Well, and it seems like the
Um,
boiler room is clearly like meant to be like allegorically hell. I mean, he's, clearly
yeah,
there's a demonic
Yeah.
aspect to what he does. I was wondering like when Hellraiser came out. We'd have to have Nick here for that one, I guess.
I
Maybe
think it
Katie.
was late 80s,
Late
Later.
80s. I think it was
Yeah.
88.
87 or 88. Yeah.
Um, yeah, but the boiler room, I mean, Leah said it in her intro, like I forget how you put it, but you just said like it's every sort of like bad thing you could think of about him in
Mm.
terms of his backstory, right? Um, which is definitely, I mean, look, spoiler alert, right? You want to give the backstory, Leah? Give the backstory to the movie. Do you remember it well? Since it's been
So
12 years, I'm putting you on the spot.
yeah, well, but I rewatched it last night. Like
I
the
did. Okay,
first
okay, that's what I thought.
yeah, the first time I watched it was like 12 years ago. But from the little research I did, like this is a kid that was born out of
Oh,
a
you went way
abusive
back.
situation. He has been coined of the son of 100 psychopaths, without getting, too grim of how that went down. But there's a lot of like religious iconography in the
Yeah.
beginning because like there's this spin that his mother was a nun and he was just born from hate itself. And there are some religious like motifs in this movie, which I think
I
is
feel like
like,
there's a lot in this movie.
yeah,
Um, which there was a book that I know it's interrupted. Jason, I forget his name, something or other, but he wrote a book about the horror of the '70s. Katie, you'd like this. Is like just a general historian thing. You'd all like this, but I seem to recall that Wes Craven had like a fairly religious upbringing, maybe, and that was perhaps part of it. Either that or he was pulling. But it's clearly very um, religious,
right. I mean, he's a
influenced.
dream demon, right?
Right,
And we are already making that illusion of like the boiler room is hell. It's
right.
so close to the
Early in
circle
the
of
movie, she's
hell.
like got the cross on the wall that she like
Yeah.
hugs, and you get a close-up shot of Jesus. I mean, but yeah, no. So you were saying, so he's right. He's born son of a thousand maniacs. But more immediately, right? Like in the movie, in terms of he is
Right. In terms of this movie, he was a child predator that was hunted down by the town's parents after a legal paper trail gone amiss
right,
because somebody didn't sign the right form.
right,
And that feels actually timeless because it's still bureaucratic nonsense that I feel like we deal with today and is also something that people would want to react to. It's just
right.
like, this is evil incarnate. This is how people react to it. Get rid of it. And then somehow it still transpires in society. Like, it is really a great thread of like how trauma just continues on, which horror
Yeah,
in general always plays with. I can't say always, but 9 times out
in
of
its
10.
better moments, right? It tends to play
Yeah,
with,
in its
sure.
better moments. And so he's there to continue to haunt and continue to wreak havoc in this town and
Right.
kill the kids. So that is really
I
the
mean, it's
evil.
yeah. Right. Well, and I think that like I feel like a great story, regardless of what its focus is, or like meaning if its focus is small or if its focus is large, whether it's the entire life of a person or it's like a singular moment or it's made up or it's fiction, but like a great story to me always feels like one that's rich enough that you could tell other parts of it from other perspectives, right? Like a classic is right, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead is just like
Mhm.
Hamlet told from the point of like the two gatekeepers. But the idea that this movie is really a revenge tale against the parents for what they did to him, which raises all kinds of questions in terms of sort of, what's wrong in the eyes of, let's call it God. Like, is murder wrong? Is it killing? Right? It's the old, were they wrong to do the thing that they did? But like, you could tell this movie, and it would maybe be, you could never do it because of a rights issue, but it would be an interesting kind of remake of the idea of a bunch of parents who, you know, when they were younger, let's say, or something, or how you're never really quite clear how like what the time difference is from when they actually did this to when he sort of reappears. I don't know that that's ever quite really established, but and what do you think, Katie? I hear you got look like you got a thought on that.
It
Do you think
depends how canon you consider Freddy's Nightmares.
right? Okay,
So
so what's the
for,
Freddy Nightmares version of
I
it?
think they say it's around 68.
Right. So it's right. So the impression, right. So the impression you get is that like this happened when they were young parents, right? Which is Sean's a young father. Like I have young kids. Like somebody messes with kids, I think it's bad no matter what. You don't have to be a parent to get it, but like when you have young kids, you're like particularly sensitive to it. So these parents like were pissed he got off on a technicality. They decided to do something about it and they burn him alive in his boiler room where he took the kids, right? Like that's the thing you do get from this. Like that's, we didn't do our cast, but what's her face? She gives a good her mom, I can't believe Bonnie Blakely, no, Ronnie Blakely as her mom gives a good like, we that's where he took the kids and so that's where he burned them alive. I mean, again, it's like Leah said, it's pretty horrific, but you could just tell the movie where and when you look at the death of the kids, right? Like it's and this is where I think it fits, like with what he actually does is they're really like the parents are made to suffer, right? So just to go through it, Tina's mother is obviously in some kind of like she's running around with a boyfriend in Europe. So the degree to which her like love life has worked out, or even her maternal life has worked out, like not great. And you could read into the idea that like 16 years ago or whatever it was, 17, 18 years ago, when she murdered this guy in a factory with her young daughter at home, like it really messed her up. And now she's gallivanting around Europe, with whatever, like on some other guy's dime, while her daughter's home sleeping around with like the town bad boy. She dies horrifically, and we should definitely talk about the deaths. But just to go through the parent thing, right? Like they say, like we're trying to reach the mother, like so she doesn't even know. So think about that. Like you're not going to get that phone call. Your daughter's been murdered in a horrific way. Like you're on a vacation, right? You have to come home. You weren't there. Like all sorts of guilt, and then eventually you're going to find out, like because of what else is happening, what the connection is. You're going to make that same connection that John Saxon does. Then you've got, Rod, who presumably his parents were also involved, who is accused of murdering his girlfriend, eventually then hangs himself, according to anybody's belief, right? He's made to seem like a suicide, which again, in that Christian sense, is like really, really bad. And if you listen to what the priest says, and this is one of the things that I think Wes Craven doesn't get a lot of credit for, like
Worst funeral speech in film.
worst. He's like, live by the sword, die by the sword at his funeral. There's so many great like moments like that. So right, so that's pretty horrific. Like, so you're the mom, like you think about that. Like, imagine the movie where it's like the close up on the mom sitting there, like knowing that this is the thing she caused. Like, while the priest says that, like heartbreak. And then obviously, and I think the Johnny Depp character, I want to talk about Glenn specifically, just because it's Johnny Depp, which is worth noting, and we'll get into it. But like, it's hard to know like how much he's even really clued into what's going on. Like, is he just the dolt?
Seem to be.
He doesn't seem to be affected by any of it. So I was trying to figure out, like, his parents must have been on it. The father definitely has something going on. But again, easily the most horrific death of all, right?
Yeah.
Like, easily the most, like, the coroner's in the bathroom throwing up. So anyways, it's an unbelievable revenge tale on the parents is I think, incredible, just on its own.
I have to confess, I've seen this movie multiple times, and I'm still not exactly sure what happened to Glenn.
Like, in terms of how he dies?
But like, what?
Or like his
'Cause
involvement?
we don't see it from the point of view of what Freddy is doing in the dream world. So we're just kind of
He's just taken
to
into the bed,
imagine-
right? He's
Yeah,
just sunken
and
into the
then-
bed.
Gets pulled
Oh, yeah.
into the bed,
Dies
and then
in.
the blood comes out. So we're left to imagine what the middle between going in and blood comes out. Like, it's never really clear what
Yeah.
even caused that. We just know it's the worst thing we've ever seen.
I mean, again, it's like something out of Dante's Inferno. Like he was pinned to the ceiling and ripped open, and like his entire body spilled out, and then appeared in his bedroom to torture his parents for the rest of all time. By the way, it
And-
doesn't even just stop there, because if you remember, and I know Leah watched it last night, but I had totally forgotten about this. But then there's the scene John Saxon arrives at the house, and John Saxon, we should just say, is Nancy's father, the town sheriff. Interesting contrast to the sheriff in Halloween, but he's the town sheriff. He shows up and he walks in with, Glenn, Johnny Depp's father, and the ceiling is soaked through with blood
Yeah.
and dripping, and a guy gets a bucket
Comes with
to
a bucket.
collect it.
Yeah.
Which I just thought, like, again, you could see that in like a very dark filmmaker and like a whatever, an Ari Aster kind of filmmaker, like just being, that's probably too bloody for him, but like a horrific scene in that moment, if
And
you're
I
just telling the parent story.
Liam made an incredible point earlier, too, about practical effects.
Yeah.
If we think about what was possible with CGI in 1984, that scene could have looked so dumb.
So dumb.
And the fact that they did use the practical effects makes it incredible and something that we're still scared by.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, the production of the movie is really pretty exquisite considering it was made for a budget and it was made by a studio that didn't have a lot of money. And there's this great quote by Orson Welles that says the lack of limitations is the enemy of creativity. And obviously this movie had its limitations, but and we should probably give the credit to the crew who are involved. I don't have their names right in front of me, but the practical effects, I mean, and again, even the introduction, like I was saying before, Freddy, like his arms are extending, right? You see his face right away, even though it's in shadow, so it's very creepy in that way. Um, and in later movies, he did look cheesy, right? So you could see where it could have gone horribly awry.
Mhm.
Um, you have like the the tongue out of the phone one was like an obviously like cheesy effect, and yet because the story around it is so twisted, right? And again, it's coming from like what Leah said, like he's so bad, and it's a revenge thing. Like it's layer on top of layer on top of layer on top of layer of just pure evil. Evil things, wrong things, bad things, so that like when even that happens, the taunting her about the boyfriend, right? That like Jason never taunted you, Michael Myers never taunted you. Like this guy's taunting you and sticking out his tongue through the phone that's been disconnected because you ripped, it's great. Like so even the fact that it's actually practical, like you said, and it's not CGI makes it even just I don't know, creepier.
Do we know one thing I was sort of interested in it is his voice. Because in the first sort of dream sequence, where I think Tina's like, oh, it's like, oh God, and he has his hand, it's like, this is God.
Right.
That's Robert Englund, I think.
Yeah.
And then for the rest of it, we have his voice pretty much always several octaves lower. And I didn't know if that was like intentional or why is it only in that moment where he says that. But I don't know if that's, and I don't know. I'm curious if for you guys, like, if you noticed that, if that's if I don't, I haven't seen enough of the sequels to know if like that's a thing that sort of goes on, but it's just like that struck me.
I mean, I think of his voice, like his outfit and the fingernail, like everything became iconic. And no, I don't think his voice was like altered unless it was just like a simple sound mix or
Yeah.
if it dropped an octave. But like he's doing things from the very beginning of the movie again, just as a boogeyman that are odd, right? So he's like, this is God, and he's the weird stretch, right? He goes from like the weird supernatural arm stretching thing, but then when he chases her down the street, like he's running like an insane maniac, like a really like the last guy in the world you would running after you.
Yeah.
Like in some ways, you wouldn't even want that guy running after you because like the sprinter, like this guy's just so creepy. And then he appears off behind the tree, and so right away, like again, it's a dream, obviously, but and he cuts off his fingers, and he's like everything is gleeful.
Bleeding green, and
He's
yeah.
bleeding green. And like you said, you don't know what he can do. You don't know anything about him. And yet, so I think like the voice, the taunting, um, it all, even when it shouldn't work, even like when it is like a lame jump scare, like him jumping up from behind the bed. I mean, you've earned it by that point, but like, and he's just going, yar, like, I mean, so basic, but like, by that point, you're really like legitimately scared of him as a character because like story wise, it's great. Um, but in terms of like, just to sort of talk production for a second, right? So somebody mentioned, I think, or the character Freddy Krueger, Wes Craven had a bully in school,
Yeah.
right? Whose name was Fred Krueger or something like that, or was literally Freddy Krueger, I guess. And he even named, what is it? The family in Last House on the Left was Krug, right? So I should
The
remember.
Yeah.
main villain is
Or the
Krug.
main villain is Krug, right?
Yeah.
So there you go. So he clearly did not like this guy at all. See, and if he had made that movie 20 years later with that same story, like Fred Krueger would now be a guy like on social media who we would all know. He'd be like, I'm the original Fred Krueger. Yeah, I beat him up, and it would sort of kill the whole thing. Instead, he's just some like horrible person living at home. Like we have no idea, but clearly made an impression. The red and green sweater I thought was interesting only because with Christmas looming already, we're just about ready to start singing Christmas songs in my house. But I thought it was interesting that those were the colors that were like the worst contrast to the human retina or something like that was why he chose them. That's interesting. And obviously, look, the iconic, fingernail glove. I mean, it's the kind of thing where like in a Hollywood marketing team could spend a bajillion dollars and 5 years trying to come up with something, and it would be such bullshit. And somebody just with a glove with fingernails that are knives, scared, like terribly scary.
What's interesting with the fingernail glove too, I mentioned in our episode about The Shining how I had seen The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror first, and it kind of killed some of the scares for me because I knew it was coming. I also had seen the Treehouse of Horror based on Nightmare on Elm Street, but found the Simpsons version scary. And it just built
Hmm.
up my fear of the actual movie. And I think part of it was the finger knives.
It's again, it's the finger, like there are versions like look, Leatherface's chainsaw is scary, right? Like that's a scary thing, and to be sure, that's a scary movie too. And obviously, the sound and all that, and the teeth of a chainsaw is scary. But I feel like where you get a lot of the miles out of the fingernails is not only that it allows him to be expressive, which was the thing that Wes Craven talked about why he did the burn. He said the burn was like a mask. I thought that was interesting to read in the research that he said he gave him the burn scars because it was like a mask, and that, but he wanted a mask where he could be expressive, exactly the opposite of Michael Myers. And the fingernails obviously play into that. But for me, the thing about the movie that I think really, again, does such a good job is I'll just kind of rattle them off because they really make impressions on me. But the girl's doing the jump rope, right? Like in white, also very like choirish girl, like kind of like right, virginal, like innocent. Okay, that's not necessarily Christian, that's just child, but like they're singing everything sort of in that gloss, right? What is that? Highlighting, high contrast kind of thing, sort of blown out. So you get okay, fine, that's kind of dream sequency, but it's the the first time she sees that she falls asleep in class is one of my favorite scenes, that Nancy falls asleep, right? The teacher, he's reading, I think like Richard III, were it not that I had bad dreams, I think is from Richard III. And the way that gets drowned out, and that's, by the way, the Lynn Shay is the teacher. So she's there in that scene, which is kind of great. And then she falls asleep and she looks over and there's like Tina in the body bag,
Hmm.
right? Like that's a scary image. I don't remember if it's in this movie. I think in the boiler room, there's like the goat that runs by, right? Which also goat, like hell. There's a kind of correlation there. Very scary images. There's all these things that he pulled together so that by the time you get to a blood geyser bursting out of a bed, um, or tongues coming out of phones, you're just so, I think, on guard or on edge, in a way that very few movies really manage to do outside of just a jump scare, that can make you feel like uneasy about things. Um, and I just feel like I think that just sets an interesting tone for the movie, right? For the character. So we should talk about this, but like, you talk about a time capsule. One of the things that's always a good time capsule is how do the people evolve to the threats. So I feel like generally speaking, there's kind of like a deeper knowledge base that exists within every protagonist with every subsequent generation, right? Like there was one Halloween movie where somebody was talking about a guy with knives and like guy with knives, like we've got terrorists, like we're not afraid of this. And so the kids in this movie are very different than like the kids in the Halloween movie. And part of that, of course, is to the mythology of who he is. But like, in Halloween and in Friday the 13th, right? Like they're just completely oblivious. They care about getting laid and maybe roasting some marshmallows with Friday the 13th, but they're always oblivious. And even though like there's always like 17 of them dead, they're like, where'd John go? Like, all right, well, we'll just go on. Like here, they know what's happening to them, and that's so unsettling. And even from the moment that they're going to be killed, it's none of this like they're walking into a room and they just don't see him, like glass is breaking and Tina's like shaking Rod and Rod's dead asleep and he's not waking up, and she goes downstairs and she's clearly wearing something you would never wear to go outside, obviously. And there's all those things that are just like these images that just add up in the movie. I feel like to just by the time you're, not a very long distance into it, it's, by the time she's in the classroom, like you're really scared. That's the only word I have for it. Like really scared.
Yeah, it's also interesting to me that there are some parallels. I mean, it's also, it's an LA produced movie. It's shot around near where I live. Like it's, John Marshall High School in Los Feliz is the exterior, which is the exterior high school in so many movies and television shows. And it was also worth noting that, I think you mentioned the budget, but it's
By the
less
way, did
than
you
two.
like the Venice Beach Canal shot? I was surprised
Yeah. That's what I was like.
as in LA. Yeah.
Yeah. Watching it, I was like, oh, you shot this on the east side, and then you went to Venice for that
Went to go to
one
Venice for
shot.
that one shot.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh, that's okay."
They must have had
But,
some short end pickups.
it was like, "Oh, that's" I mean, it's a nice area, don't get me wrong. But, yeah, so I think that it has that, and Halloween had that too. Halloween Pasadena set
Mhm.
movie for a lot of it, South Pasadena set movie.
Sure.
So it's like, to me, they're very sort of similar aesthetics where, like, people don't necessarily, who aren't from or don't live in Los Angeles, don't really know that, like, there's a lot of Los Angeles that, like, can really double for small town America.
Right, but that's what I feel like it did a good job. Like you don't watch
Yep.
this movie and think it's like the Lynch thing. I mean, I don't think he shot in California. I don't remember, but like Blue Velvet, like it just feels like it's that every town USA kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and this one just definitely, had that quality where the world seemed very small, that the town was obviously very small, like
Right.
that, they're reacting, you know, they're being able to sort of band together to burn this guy alive, years earlier, and then, it's just the sort of tightness of the world, I think, helps this movie and helps the story. Because again, it's like, I don't think people watching it for the first time are necessarily like, okay, the Freddy's doing this for revenge. Like, it's like, okay, they sort of piece it together when mom tells the story. But I think, when you look back on it, it all makes sense. The one thing that I'll ask you guys about, that didn't necessarily make so much sense to me, is the ending, right? And I've read that, they've
Not
they've had a
supposed to
few.
be there.
Yeah, I've read that they had a few versions of this ending.
Which specific
Um,
part about the ending when she defeats him, or like the postscript, the
post, post.
epilogue, whatever you
So,
call
they're walking out of the house. It's apparently there are a lot of fog machines going at once. Very, very, very foggy. The girls are jumping rope again, and then she goes into the car with her friends.
it. Right.
So it's like, oh, maybe it's the whole thing was a dream, or maybe by killing him they were alive again, or she's still dreaming. We have no
Or she's
idea.
still dreaming.
We have no idea what's going on there. The probably, in terms of canon, probably the thing that makes most sense is that this post thing is a dream.
Yeah.
Um, but and then she's in the car with her friends, and then, like, she starts screaming. She gets really afraid after she voluntarily gets herself in the car. I don't know why she's screaming, and
You don't
why
know why
she.
she's screaming when she gets into the car at the end, like in the last. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so I maybe you guys can fill in those blanks for
Well,
me.
what did everybody
I
think about the ending in general? I'm curious, and Sean brought it up. What did you ladies think?
So I think it's suggesting everything has been a dream, because part of my theory is with the kids in the jump rope, I think that is sort of a bookend for the entire movie, where those children were maybe some of the original victims of Freddy Krueger.
That's
The
interesting.
song that they sing is so, like, who would sickeningly, like, teach that kind of song to
Oh,
poor
the girls jump
children?
roping, or the original. Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
They're
they're
the
at the
victims for sure.
beginning of the
Right.
film and at the end of the film, almost to suggest this whole thing was a dream. She never escaped. She gets into the car, and you're thinking, like, it's a false win in her eyes. And then when the car drops, like, the top down goes down, it's in the colors of Freddy Krueger. So, like, it's pointing out that, like, he's always had her in his grasp,
Right.
and he's never gonna let go.
Right. Right. What do
So
you
that's
think?
how I interpret it.
Yeah,
But
I like that interpretation too.
I like that interpretation, and I love the idea of the little girls being a bookend to show you that everything's a dream.
yeah.
I and this is like completely an opinion thing. I think the car with the Freddy stripes looks a little silly.
Oh,
And
for
up
sure.
Yeah.
until that
Look.
point, nothing in the movie was that silly. And then back to back, you get the most obvious mannequin in the world when the mom goes through the window.
Right.
Then you get that car roof. And I feel like if those two things were better, I would probably like the ending better. I just, the way it hits right now, when I watch it, I'm like, this whole movie was so dark and this just feels a little too goofy. But
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't
It's funny.
dislike
So
the theme. I just dislike the way it's portrayed.
interesting. I'll tell you. So, okay. So obviously you could definitely do certain things like the car scarier, and maybe there were the limitations of budget. But see, it's interesting to me because I feel like some of that stuff was perhaps intentional in that like the whole thing again feels like this sort of bizarre hall of mirrors, fun house of mirrors. Um, there's so much about like the movie from start to finish that feels kind of like again, it's just like tweaked a little bit, right? To feel like it's just this side of being real, which is what I like about Leah's take that the whole thing is maybe the whole thing is a dream. Um, my feeling is more like just in terms of the ending specifically, the very brief version is just that like something akin to, and obviously later movies would just sort of screw this canon up, but something akin to the idea that like she never makes it out of the dream. Like, right? Like if you were with her father, like you would probably have found her like in bed catatonic, like not dead yet because he hasn't gotten her because she's somehow managing to like kind of stay one step ahead in the dream, right? And maybe because he's just torturing her because that's who he is. But
Mhm.
but clearly, she goes from like robbing him of his power, which is the thing that she got from Johnny Depp, right? Like that was his Venice Beach research contribution or Venice canals. Um, you know, and she takes it, but again, I feel like number one, if you're listening to Glenn in this situation, like you're probably fucked from the get, which we'll talk about Glenn in a second. But but I just feel like that's it. She just never makes it out. So the idea that the whole thing was a dream, I actually buy into because obviously the movie begins with a dream, and so you could. But even if, and this is what I mean by it being a big enough story, like even if you play it just straight, right? Like it's a dream. She wakes up, Tina and the rest of them are all going to school, and it's real. And then these are the things that are happening, and the parts that we believe are dreams. And then the end is just like she's perennially sort of left in a dream, and the movie ends and effectively on a nightmare, right? Like which is what kind of the creepiest dreams or nightmares really are the ones that like you're having a dream. They're usually the ones you remember too, right? If you think about it, like it's not really like it is in the movie where you wake up and you say, "Oh my God, like I had the worst dream," or somebody might say that, but then they describe it and it's like always starts out normal. Like I don't know, it was like I was home and this thing was normal and it seemed okay, but then I went down a hallway and it wasn't what I thought, and I was wearing something I would never have worn, and I was in a plate, right? So like I always feel like even the way she steps out of the door from from the bedroom to the front door, like, and she's in that ridiculous sweater that she wears throughout the movie, like, it's just to me like that's the thing. She probably never makes it out. And that's the ultimate sort of victory of evil, which is, kind of the horror conceit. And the parents, it seems clear, like deserve to have the revenge visited upon them because, they all seem like even before he shows up to start killing their kids are not living like the
Asleep at the
greatest.
wheel.
Yeah, they're all kind of asleep at the wheel or not living great lives, in some respects. And so, it's interesting. It's an interesting commentary on like what was clearly like a big lock key generation, or latchkey generation, excuse me, not lock.
Yeah. And I just wanted to take a moment to even like talk about the comedy bits. And I think this movie helped open up the fact of because budgets are so limited for horror, especially in the 80s, that that was the way to lean into like, we don't have the budget to do this right, so at least let's do it funny. And I just think of that mannequin being sucked in the door as a big example of that. And I know you said you didn't like the comedy in like the later pieces. I think at least to open the door for what we have now is horror comedy is a very strong genre in itself, and this movie helped establish that because Freddy is sort of that little like trickster guy.
Mhm.
And I mean trickster demon, dream demon,
Sure.
so close. And there's other elements that I just like look back at this with the mop bucket. That was just a funny like
Right. It's
bit.
just like over the top. It's just
Yeah.
like you don't need that, but it's over the top.
And the mom
Um,
like grabs a handle of alcohol out of like the linen closet, and I was just like, that
there's so many
is so
things.
scripted.
There's by the way, so listen, I mean, we've talked about like It Follows as being a movie that has certain deliberate kind of there's so many things that I'd have to go back to the 80s to really look to see like how much of this was just I don't know, limited set dressing ability or budget or something. But like
Right,
Glenn's room is kind of incredible. First of all, Glenn, if the movie were made 25 years later, this guy's the ultimate YouTuber. He's sleeping with a TV on his bed. He's got the record player on his
right.
nightstand. He's got the
The
giant headphones.
headphones.
Like this guy is jacked in before like you even could be jacked in. Um, but yeah, I think that the mannequin through the door, like the humor, I just feel like is again in keeping with the dreamlike quality of what the movie's going for, right? Like
Yeah.
weird things happen, his arms stretch out, like things are not um bound by the what would you call it?
laws of physics,
The laws
the
of
real
physics,
laws.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Um,
But
yeah.
I'm curious because we we've talked about Scream and we probably will on a future episode, but like where that was intentionally meta, the
You think
at the
in Nightmare on Elm Street, you think was meta?
I
Wes
don't.
I think
I
Craven's
so.
mean,
New
No, I don't.
Nightmare
Yeah.
is
Okay.
definitely proto Scream.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
of
but
course.
I don't know, but like looking back on it, the extended arms, the Stretch Armstrong thing, and just the his cutting his own fingers off and then bleeding green, like that stuff is disturbing as hell. But you could also be like, Leah, to your point, where oh, it's actually kind of funny how disturbing it is. Like I'm so like taken
But
aback by it. It's like, oh, that's so gross, but I'm laughing a little bit.
no, but
Uh,
that's I think the point. Like I
yeah,
think a lot of things that people describe as being afraid of, like there's so many fears, right? Like there's bugs,
yeah.
there's insects, there's dismemberment, there's fear of being burned. Like some things are more obviously, terrifying just on the face of it. But even certain things, like if somebody were to describe it to you like, well, I'm afraid of heights, you're kind of like, really? Like I guess I kind of get it. Or but this movie hits all of them. So, yeah, he's cutting off his fingers and it seems silly, but yet it's pretty like I guarantee you
But
find
it's
somebody
like, oh,
they thought it
like
was
that's so
terrifying.
it's like,
Gross.
yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like I love that it went there
Right.
because
And like
it's
5 minutes
like
into the movie.
yeah.
Well,
It's like you love all that stuff.
I think a lot of it speaks to the atmosphere too, because there are so many things that, in my opinion, like the fingers or whatever, that when you're watching the movie, they come across as scary. But if somebody just showed you that clip with no context, it would be funny.
Right.
Or like the tongue coming out of the phone.
Sure,
I think it's
exactly.
that the movie builds up so much dread that it puts you in that headspace. So even something that like is very silly can work in that moment.
Right. Well, I think again, listen, we've all seen Meg Ryan do her thing in the diner and freak out, and we've hang on to your hat. It's going to be a bumpy night. Like anything that becomes iconic, right? The Hannibal Lecter, like fava beans and a nice Chianti, like it gets said over and over again. But when you watch the movie, like what um, right after all that's happening, like here's another thing I think the movie does really well. Like I'm pretty sure no, obviously Rod is an exception to this, but nobody dies like in their dream, at least in the first one. So like where everybody's killed is again in your bedroom, right? He comes after Nancy like in her bathroom. Tina doesn't die like outside on the street. Like she makes it all the way to the place that in every other movie you'd think would be like safe. Right. And I think that, and so like she gets, and then when she dies, like, I guess it's a bit of a nod to Poltergeist with Joanne Wally Kilmer floating, going up the wall there. But like, that's Johnny Depp's death scene sort of overshadows that, but like Tina's death scene is horrific. Even by the way, the fact that he's under the covers with her, right? So like it's kind of a good logic move because you think to yourself like, why wouldn't Rod do something? And part of it is Rod clearly thinks there's somebody under there. Like when he reaches for the covers, he's like hesitant because he's expecting to pull it off and see somebody under there, and he can't figure out like how is there nobody under there with her. And right? Like it's a classic scare. Like there's something under your bed, there's something under your covers, right? I watched a movie the other day. The person goes and hides under their covers, and the reverse, I think it was like Smile, and the reverse shot was the demons under the cover and sucks
Yep.
them under or something. And you're like, okay, um, that's part of I think the real success of the movie in terms of its storytelling. It sort of it holds true to that mythology, and it makes you feel like when you're watching it, like, okay, like Sean said, like I'm scared of this. I don't want to watch this one. This guy can't get me anywhere. Um, the first place I actually heard the story, which I didn't realize till after the fact, was I was on a camp. I was for camp. I went to sleepaway camp, and at the end of the summer they would do an overnight when you were a certain age, and I went on an overnight. And the counselors were like, "Okay, ghost story time." Again, classic, sitting around, and a counselor decided to tell the story about a guy named Fred who wore a sweater and killed you in your sleep. Good night, everybody. Have a good time. We'll see you in the morning on like in the woods. So I hadn't seen the movie. I had no idea, but like that was really I was scared out of my wits that night, thinking like this guy's coming out of the woods, and then and then I finally see the movie like a few years later, and I'm like, oh, like this prick fucking teenager counselor was like saw Nightmare on Elm Street and was like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna screw with these kids tomorrow. Like, listen, before you go to sleep tonight, like, I just want to let you know, like, there's this guy. If you see him in your sleep, like, run for it in your sleep. Like, that's scary. That's scary.
Because there's
Um,
nothing you can do.
because there's nothing you can do, and
If
you
you're
can't not fall
asleep,
asleep.
there's nothing you can do.
The tagline became a great thing. Whatever you do, don't fall asleep. Right? That became the line in every movie. Right? And it's because you sit there and you can't, there's no workaround for that, right? I like that by the third movie, like they're in a mental hospital because of course that's where you'd be. And I like that the kids, I said this before, like they're not really like, again, they're not exactly idiots or oblivious except for Glenn, who I guess I
Well,
keep
Glenn
mentioning.
Glenn marches to the beat of his own drum, you know?
Oh, so here's my question. Like, does Glenn, is Glenn, like, has Glenn had a, he's clearly mentioned that he had a bad dream, but does Glenn buy into any of this? Is Glenn like the idiot, oblivious guy who just like, yeah, I had a bad dream? Like, I feel like Glenn doesn't have a care in the world. He's just kind of trying to get along with his girlfriend.
I feel
I
like
think
Glenn is what most people would be in that situation. Like, if one of us had a dream like that, our
Right.
first instinct isn't it's real and he's coming for me.
Right.
It's
Right.
wow, what a crazy bad dream that is.
Right.
So I think because we as the viewer know that Freddy is real, it's easy to be like, oh, Glenn's oblivious. But like Glenn might actually be the most realistic one in that he's like, yeah,
Great point.
I had a bad dream.
Right. Great
Yeah,
point. Great point.
that's just a really good point because it's like if they were all in on, oh my God, this is happening to us, and there wasn't like one potentially sane person, is like, you're telling me that there's a character from all of our dreams that are actually murdering us. Like, what do you guys do? Like, there needs to be that point of view. That's not the adults talking down, that talking down to the kids. So that's it does fit in well. Where I think, Jeremy, maybe you're getting to, like, is that he doesn't really come off that opinion ever. Like it's pretty much
No, he like
his
from the beginning.
perspective. Yeah.
Like if you were playing Glenn today, I actually feel like you'd play him more cynically, right? You'd have him be like the like asshole boyfriend who really just wants to get laid. But like if you take it at face value, right? Like that's kind of what it is. Like he dismisses most of their concerns. He's like, yeah, I don't know, I had a bad dream, like in the very beginning, big fucking deal. She goes to like Tina's house basically because he's hoping I'm going to be there with two girls and one of them's my girlfriend. Like, by the way, that's great setup. Like speaking as a once former high school boy, like that's a dream. Like, oh, we get to go to my girlfriend. Okay, so they go do that. Then Rod shows up, who they're clearly like not friends. He clearly like sees
Yeah.
like
He's
these
this guy's kind of a prick, but
right,
yeah.
thinks he's kind of a prick. Like Rod's got the thing with the scraper, so he's clearly affected. And then he makes the remark about no more bad dreams for all of us. So like, even though he's playing the big tough guy, like he clearly takes it seriously. Obviously, he wants to get laid, but he also, you could argue, goes over to Tina's house because he doesn't want to sleep at home alone and have another bad dream, right? Like, so he's going to go make up with his girlfriend, and yes, he'll get laid, but also he's not going to be alone. And like Johnny Depp, like even when he like the next shot of him is them humping, right? Like he hears that, and like his only thought is like, oh God, man, morality sucks. Like he's just dialed into like, I just got to get Nancy alone and this and that. And then every other thing, like he goes to her house, he's sneaking in her window. It's like the first time, which obviously is a big thing for Wes Craven, sneaking in windows, clearly.
Billy Loomis is a window
Yeah.
sneaker as well.
Right, sneaking in the windows, which obviously was an ode to Johnny Depp doing it. But like, I didn't realize Johnny Depp does it barefoot. Like he just talks about stepping on the rose bushes barefoot. I'm like, this kid walked across the street barefoot. Like, doesn't even have the wherewithal to like put on shoes. You know, like he goes over there. Like he's just like, she calls, he comes running, but like not savvy enough to like do the thing that she needs him to do. Like just dude, watch me. 20 minutes, by the way. Not like all night. That was the other thing. Like, I remember thinking it was all night. She's like, listen, just watch me for like 20 minutes. He's like, yeah, no problem. Totally got you, babe. Not a problem. Like, wants to get laid, but like still can't manage it because like the brain power is like too distracted by the TVs and the radio. So he just can't figure it out, right? And like, I feel like when he dies and he gets sucked into that bed, I love that you don't see anything else. I actually love that he's the one death that you really like, there's no delay. Like, I think he just wakes up and he's utterly shocked that this is happening to him. Like beyond the like, I'm shocked. Oh shit, I shouldn't have fallen asleep. Like I think he's like, it's real. I can't believe. And then he's in the bed, and then that's it. Like I just don't think he bought into this at all for 1 second at all. So, but I thought he was an interesting time capsule to me into like the '80s mindset.
For sure. So before we, wrap up, I'm curious to hear because you've obviously stuck with the franchise. How do you? Because I'm looking at the other films. They're all directed by different people, pretty much. A lot of them have different I guess that some of them returned for the third movie, right?
Right.
And then
Yeah.
you also have Lawrence Fishburne, Patricia Arquette. You have some
Right.
other
Third
big
one's great.
name.
Third one's great.
and so it's a, you know, kind of a hit or miss. Like, you know, where do you rank sort of this franchise as, you know, however many movies there have been compared to some of the other
Something
ones?
I respect with the Elm Street sequels. For me personally, some of them work better than others, but
Sure.
I do respect that they all do something really different. I think some franchises are basic. The first one does phenomenally well, and then they're basically just remaking that first one over and
Sure.
over with different characters. Every Elm Street movie is in the same continuity and connects to each other, but has its own plot and is doing its own thing. And whether I think it's a hit or a miss, I respect that they're being creative at least.
For sure. So okay, before we go, last sort of thing. Like I, you know, normally we'll do hot takes, and if you guys have any hot takes, for sure, feel free to share them. Here's my question. I guess my last question: Is there a because I guess sort of a hot take and in a question itself? Is there another character in movies that is as that's a character that's a fantastical character, not like a real life character, not like, you know, not like Buffalo Bill, for example, right? Is there a character that is scarier or as scary as Freddy Krueger? Um, and then I have a part two to that. But if I'm curious if you guys think that there's anybody who stacks up, and curious to hear if so, who in terms of just like somebody who like realistically, if they were living in your neighborhood or if they were in your existence, would be scarier than that.
Hmm. But we're going for fantastical because I've already mentioned the creeper as
Well, you said that you thought they were similar. You obviously, do you think the Creeper is scarier than Freddy Krueger? Like, how do you see that? How do you think this movie holds up against that one? Because that's like 20 years later, that movie already, than this one.
yeah. I honestly, and maybe this is just nostalgia speaking, I would say Jeepers Creepers, the creeper is scarier. Because it is more rooted in the world. It would be like every like 20 something years
Right.
that it would come back, and it would be based off a curse. But to like watch something grab somebody and just fly away, and you're just there without any way to stop it, you're just watching that life float away. And I think there is like even a nod at the very end of the first movie where the creeper sharpening his tools, which is very similar to Freddy Krueger
Right.
sharpening his own nails.
Yes.
And it's almost like an ode, a wink, and a love letter to what was inspiring it. But it is, yeah, that Jeepers Creepers, I would say, lacks any of the funny that is in Freddy Krueger, and I think that's what scares me a little more.
So if you're picking basketball teams, Jeepers Creepers, the Creeper becomes your first pick. Maybe Freddy Krueger's he's next or
Oh, I
something.
mean, they're all iconic. Like, I'm not
No,
even
no,
talking,
sure. I
yeah,
meant in terms of what Sean's question was, like scaring you.
scaring
Like
me. Yeah,
if
for
you had to
sure.
open a closet, a door, and face one of them, you'd rather face Freddy Krueger than the
Yes.
Creeper. The Creeper is gonna
Yes.
stop you dead in your tracks.
Interesting.
Interesting. Okay, good. I like that. What about you, Katie? Where does he rank for you? Or
So I've mentioned several times on this podcast how much I love it, but I don't know that Pennywise is scarier than Freddy Krueger. I think I'm going to call him a close second,
right?
but I think a lot of the things that are scary about Pennywise kind of are the things that come with him, like making the adults indifferent, making people like it's not the character itself. Where Freddy Krueger, the character himself, is terrifying.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say Pennywise is a close second, but Freddy Krueger still takes it for me.
Yeah, I think I have to. I mean, I'm thinking about it. It's a really good question, Sean. Look, first of all, if literally to take your question literally, like Leatherface lives down the street from me, like that whole fam, like I'm moving. I mean, I'm just moving, and
But
I
you
think
can get away from
right
Leatherface.
there it is, and I think that's the thing, right? Like that's the thing. Like if we're taking the question at face value, and you're confronted with any of these things. Good point about the creeper. Maybe it's just a generation thing. I actually love Jeepers Creepers. I feel like we should do a podcast on that movie because I love that movie. I
Yeah.
really love. I even like the second one, by the way, but I really like the first one. And I'd love to dive deeper into how you see similarities. But yeah, Freddy Krueger, man. I just think like right? Like Pennywise is, I feel like, just lures you in, right? Like you talk to him in the sewer because like, why is there a clown in the sewer? But like, and Michael Myers, you just sort of don't notice. And if Jason Voorhees, that you sort of like wonder why nobody notices the 7-foot hockey player who's walking around with a machete in a kid's camp. But like Freddy Krueger to me is just like, if if I saw that in real life in my dream, like cue the black woman meme of like, oh shit, oh hell no, like I'm out of here. Like he is just to me really in the first one, and I think you said it, Sean, like you were afraid to go near the movie. Like I had seen it, and it was that thing where like after I saw it, I was like, okay, I'm scared to see this guy's face again. Like I just remember doing this as a kid. Like I can't really look. Um and I can't think of too many. I mean, even Leatherface, right? Like he's so sudden, he's there and he's not, and like you linger on Freddy, and it's just it's dreadful. So yeah, I think he's my
So
number one for sure.
yeah, so for me, I'm like, because the creeper is an interesting idea. I don't know, because to me it's like Freddy's my scariest character. It's like, oh, if this was actually, and I don't know that there's going to be a new character that's created the way that movies are made right now, a new fantastical character that's going to eclipse that. That it Freddie might hold that title for quite some time. In terms of just this, inescapable and I'm sure you could think of others that have sort of similar, like, rules of the world and rules of how the character can get to you and all of that. But like I was thinking about Pennywise, but Pennywise, um targets children, right? So if you're a
Sure.
kid watching that, like, yeah, that's scary. If you're an adult watching that, it's still scary, but not doesn't feel quite like, Freddy Krueger can get to friggin' anybody.
Right.
And I think that's the,
Feels like you should be able to avoid Pennywise too, generally speaking, right? Like, if you live in Derry, maybe like don't take that cigarette underneath the bleachers kind of thing, just like avoid that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Freddy's relentless, and I think that's the interesting thing, and he's relentless in a way that, like, Michael Myers, for example, he's relentless, but he's more methodically paced, and he's not around every single corner.
Michael
Uh,
Myers gets tripped up by closet doors.
Right.
yeah,
Right. I
yeah.
just think, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that yeah, Freddy he can get you anywhere. And that is the thing that makes him so sort of terrifying.
All right.
Um,
Any
yeah.
any final thoughts on Nightmare on Elm Street?
It's a great movie. It holds up. It's scary. It's funny. Robert
Yeah.
Englund's the man.
I mean, I wish I'll just say this. There was this because it's a great quote and it goes to your question. But when Thomas Harris wrote Hannibal, which was the sequel to Silence of the Lambs, both in book and movie, it was like one of those big deals. Was all coming out. Stephen King wrote a review for the New York Times Book Review, and I'll get you out of here in 2 seconds, Leah. I know, but he basically was like, you know, the anticipation around Hannibal Lecter was like what the anticipation was for like Dracula, right? Like in printings, like it was such an iconic character. And there's a scene in the second movie which again, it's not as good as the first, but like he walks into a house, into Ray Liotta's house, Hannibal Lecter, and there's a German Shepherd, right? And he like just waves his finger at the German Shepherd. It's like this very Dracula move, and the Shepherd like lies down. And I bring this up because Anthony Hopkins played that character, and really honestly to this day, I think that character still is so iconic because whatever else you might think of sequels or the other things, like it never lost that really evil sinisterness. And that's the only thing for me about the franchise with Nightmare on Elm Street. And I was so disappointed with the Jackie Hurley one, which I really wanted it to work. I thought he was pretty good casting. I could give a whole thing on another time why I just don't think it did work. I don't think it's mostly his fault, but there is something you got to give credit to Robert Englund in terms of how he played this thing. He just,
For sure.
tapped into something, and it's hard to think of like anything else. Just, like just hitting
He
all
earned
the
that
numbers.
star. He
Yeah,
earned
like
that
He
star.
earned it. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
for
earn
sure.
the star for sure. Um,
All right.
All
All
right.
right,
Well, listen, thank
everybody.
you guys
Well,
very much. And remember, whatever you do, don't fall asleep. Although I like to tuck in around 11 o'clock and get a nice 6 hours. But Leah, thank you for making the time today. It's lovely
Yeah.
it's lovely to see you in a capacity. I will just say for Leah, if you're not already checking it out, make sure you go to the YouTube channel, Silas Caldwell, and watch Leah's show, Survive the Night, which we are fortunate enough to be producing with her. We are about to be 5 episodes in on it, and it's only going to get better. She's an enormously talented writer and creator, so go check her out. And Katie, it's of course lovely to see you again as always, and I want to do much more of this with you for sure. And Sean, thank you for hosting and partnering and having, and I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. I was happy to talk about this one, clearly.
Yeah.